And Pierre Carley, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. We're technically into question 3, but you can pick up wherever you were.
Yes. Well, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I am new to podcasting, and I have gained some really great nuggets. For instance, I will be starting one, and I will use Anchor based on what we've talked about so far. I don't know if this is going to be one of the questions, but how long do you think the podcast should last? What would be the best time frame? And what is the limitation as far as the timing for Anchor?
Okay, well, why don't we throw to Pixie on the idea of Anchor, and then I'll answer the question about timing.
Well, I was just going to say on timing, there's no wrong way to start a podcast. There are things like micro podcasts, which are 3 to 5 minutes. There are 10-minute podcasts, 20-minute podcasts. There are the longer formatted podcasts. It's all up to you and how comfortable you are. Some people have a co-host. Some people don't. I cover a lot of this stuff. I'm going to send you a DM to give you some more information about this. But I've got all kinds of stuff for you, girl. I added you as a friend.
Yeah. Wow. This is amazing. So Anchor and Spotify is obviously a hot topic today. I personally don't know much about that, but what I do know, because the comments today relate to Twitter Spaces as a podcast. The concept of podcasting in general is a field of study. Like Annemarie's been doing it for 10 years, and I do encourage you to connect with Annemarie, Pierre Carley. But what I would recommend is that I've been statting my Twitter Spaces as Twitter Spaces, and I've actually found that there's spikes at several points in the conversation. There's an initial spike at 15 minutes, so you could do a 15-minute one. There's a really big spike at the 60-minute mark for some reason. There's an enormous spike at 90 minutes and 2 hours, and coincidentally, and I just can't believe this myself, the actual biggest spike of all is at the 3-hour mark. And I don't know why that is. I think possibly because the momentum builds to such a point that people find it, they're digging it, they're sharing it, and people come. And yesterday we right at the end, 3 hours, 14 minutes, we had our most listeners ever, 68 at one time. So the question probably isn't really about time. It's about how much time you want to do it. If you want to do it for 15 minutes, that's the right answer. If you can do them for 3 hours, you will win. The same question about blogging. How long should a blog be? Technically, 1,000 words is a sweet spot, but do you want to write 1,000 words? You might be able to get away with 300. Does that help? Yeah, Carly?
That absolutely helps, because I really want to use Twitter Spaces to have conversations and then turn them into a podcast. So this was a perfect topic for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. We will be recording this, and I will be getting stats from it. I can tell you for sure that we have made the dashboard, and that at one stage during the call we reached 363,000 people. And how cool is that?
Keith, can I just add something for Carly?
Really quickly?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Annemarie.
No, you go first.
Yeah, go.
I'll go after.
I want to remind people of one thing that I always like to mention in these technical spaces. Content overrides everything. You can have crappy equipment and great content, and you'll win. No amount of great equipment will make up for crappy content.
Yeah.
So everybody here knows that. I just want to remind everybody, it's content, content, content. Have a focus, do something you're passionate about, have juice in it, have density of information, have fast rate of revelation, new stuff coming at you all the time. That's the important stuff. What your microphone sounds like. If there's a dog barking in the background, who gives a crap? If it's really great content and there's a dog barking or a baby crying or whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And
message before make a model of the microphone.
That.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think most people would understand. We might even do a separate Twitter space on content creation, because that's a totally different story. Today's a bit of a technical.
Great.
We'll do a whole discussion about content creation. What I will do with this in mind, I want to just give a throwback to Kiki here. What we've decided to do on this concept of content, picking up on George's comment there, we've decided in this call to ask 5 questions as they relate to Twitter Spaces. And we've created a video of that, which is in the nest, the first tweet. So the questions we're going to ask are, how do you record your Twitter Spaces? How do you edit your Twitter Spaces? The third question that we're currently on is, how do you host those files and where do you send them? And then the fourth question, which we're going to get to in a minute, is how do you promote your podcast? Because I can tell you for sure the number one pain point for me is if I spend all day editing a podcast and send it to SoundCloud and 0 people listen, I'm not that inclined to do that again. I'd much prefer to have 10 people listen to a crappy podcast and spend a whole day editing something and have no one listen to it. And so we're really going to riff on the idea of marketing. But with that in mind, you had some thoughts, Annemarie, didn't you? And then I'll go back to
I could not agree more. I think that was George that was talking about that. I always say, message before make a model of the microphone, because you can't edit and mix compelling content that nurtures listeners into leads from, fluff and banter. But one thing, and I think that was Carly that asked the question, one of the things that you want to think about is your ideal client and get a balance between the content and your I guess, contribution, how much time you want to spend. But there's going to be some clients that love the short, sharp, concise, and that's what they need as they continue to build relationship with you. So what you might want to do is, when you look at the format of your show, have some of those sound bites that right at the beginning of the show, they'll give people what they need. And if they can't hang around, that's fine. Then you can go into more of the long form conversation. That will allow editing down the track for you far more easier as well. So you might have, I'm kind of thinking maybe on the podcast itself, have the conversation and the content, and then say to people, and by the way, if you want to listen to the after conversation where there was great content, I might then have a different platform that I integrate with that, where more of the long form. So again, what you've got to look at your business. What's the outcome that I want? Who's my ideal client? What's my commitment? And find a balance that works for you.
That's brilliant. What a great answer. Everyone give Annemarie a 100, please. It's an interactive show. I'm channeling Ed Sullivan tonight. And here's Annemarie. Anyway, enough of that. Torch, you had your hand up, and also Kiki has found a way back in. What are your thoughts there, Torch?
I hope I sound better now.
It's actually a very thin sound. It's actually almost robotic. I'm really fascinated by that. Really fascinated. Wonder what that is. What does it sound like to you? Have you got headphones on?
It sounds cool beans to me. I don't have the reverb on. I don't have anything different going on. So I'm curious.
I mean, it sounds totally acceptable, but this is the point of the podcast. We're actually riffing on tech. So my gut feeling is a bit robotic, a bit thin. Not like there's no gain. It's just a bit of a thin sound. And we'll keep experimenting. That's okay.
Yeah,
keep jumping back to me on it.
What about? Is it still kind of robotic?
Actually, that's better. What did you do there?
Turn the gain up.
There it is.
That's all.
It's the gain.
Yeah.
This is a live masterclass, guys. I'm making this up as I go. Making this up as I go.
You said it. You said it again. So thank you for that. I'm always open to this.
And we heard the difference. The difference.
Thank you very much. Because now I know I can take a picture and know to keep it on that game. So, but I definitely wanted to say, as a podcaster, number one, I apologize for anyone who's going to my TL and they're going and clicking on my website. I have to pay my GoDaddy renewal fee, so forgive me.
Oh, no.
I'm running by Saturday.
Yeah.
But you can still go to Spotify and Apple and look up the Crow, CRW show, which is an acronym for Candidly Right or Wrong.
Candidly Right or Wrong. Crow. Mm-hmm. That's brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like if someone's being candid, who's to say it's right or wrong? So.
Yeah, everyone's entitled to their opinion, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Now,
Tor, are your lips near your microphone? Or are you far from your microphone?
But I want to get this point out because I'm gonna forget. So, I feel like a lot of people lose the fact of just having a conversation with podcasts. I don't want to interview people. I'd rather converse, have a conversation.
Yeah, conversations is content, right?
Yeah, it is. You can have content, but if you, some people sound so scripted that it becomes like a job interview rather than just kicking back, having a glass of wine or a cold beer, and you all are having a conversation. So, there's a certain art to it as well. You're right. You can have the best equipment in the world, but if you don't have the content, the passion, the art, some people can shoot a basketball, but not everyone will make it to the NBA. So there's a
lot of people can play guitar, but not everyone can teach.
Exactly.
But let's keep it running. Let's keep it running. Yeah. What you've just said there is brilliant. I really tried. I really did try, Jer, to follow your model and just do the questions first. I really tried. I had an intention to do the questions first and then after party later, but it's just not my blood. I just love the idea of interjection at a level. Raise your hand, be polite, and this is the sort of discussions.
Keith,
George and I
your
have all the time.
spaces, your rules, so you get to do what you like, and your community will follow.
That's right. But Kiki's got her hand up, and she's got her back in. It's very glitchy today, but
and I'm reporting into Queenie, and I want to say that we had you guys don't know this, but we had one of the people that worked for Canva come and join the space, and they were actually alerted by a friend of mine who, I know these people, right, that work for Canva, because as an educator, we move around the same cycle, right? So he came over and I said, "Did you like the deck that I made?" And he's like, and I'm like, "It's up on the nest." He was on his desktop and he couldn't see the nest, and I just took the deck and I sent it to him, and he really liked it. So we have Canva approval for what we did, and he also liked what we are using this for. Because it's not just using the tool, it's what you use it for and how you use it. So we are really, it's not that we are reinventing the wheel. We are just pushing the barriers to something that hasn't happened before. Yeah. And we are trying to create this interactive podcast that is Twitter Spaces and define it and make it more interactive and more fun and more accessible, and create some visual interest so people know what is being said. Because many times somebody comes in the States and they're like, "What are we talking about?"
That's
so
right.
Now, people
they
know
do, don't they? I don't know the format, but I've got something to say. I said, hang on. And look, one of the things I'm really excited about, I've got to riff on this for a few minutes. One of the things I'm really excited about. I'm sorry. The idea that someone comes to the show willy-nilly and says, "You know what, I've got a thought that I just want to get out today. I don't know what your Twitter space is about, but I have to have my say." And I've had those spaces where people have just come and blasted me and really just spammed me. So with the idea that we now know exactly what this Twitter space is about, there's 5 questions and let's all keep to topic. This is a fantastic aid for me as a host. And you can say this, Kiki, to your friend at Canva. The fact that we now have 5 really lovely graphics that say we're now on question 3, and question 3 is, how do you host your files? As a host, that gives me a really solid ground to rebuke people and say, look, you've gone off topic there. Remember, the topic is, how do you host your Twitter Spaces files? So let's really leverage that. Canva's a big company, an Aussie company, a unicorn. It's very good, very cool. There's a lot of things going on there. An Aussie company, unicorn, they're making $1 billion a year. and they live in Sydney. So why don't we just get them on the show one day, Kiki, and really leverage what you've done there?
Okay. Yes, his name is Scott Nunez, and he's absolutely fabulous. Of course.
Yeah. So, Gia, you've got some thoughts there?
Yes, I have a question for Annemarie. Annemarie, right now, I see a lot of people coming and they're hosting a lot of Twitter Spaces, and I'm seeing actually a lot of them. I'm a heavy Spotify user, and I just searched Twitter Spaces on Spotify, and a lot of actually recorded Twitter Spaces came up, and that's when I realized now everyone is actually doing this for some time now. My question is, a lot of people now, because they found their voice through Twitter Spaces, now they're ready to start a podcast. But what is exactly the line when it comes to keep Twitter Spaces for Twitter Spaces and do some as a podcast? Because now what I'm seeing is, from my research around, is that everyone is just recording their entire Twitter Spaces and just uploading it as a podcast.
Dumping it, really.
Great question, Gia.
So,
yeah.
Yes. So this is where I'm coming from, is that where to put the line. Keep Twitter Spaces for Twitter, but dedicate some material, some content as a podcast.
Yeah. Now, that's a great question. And so a couple of things that I would recommend for yourself and then others who may be in that situation to consider is, remember that anything that you create as a business, no matter what platform you are using to create it, so whether it be Twitter Spaces, a podcast, doing a live, using social media platforms, you really are doing that as a way to build, obviously, your reach and get in front of your ideal client, build reputation, to become known as that, the go-to person and that choice versus just a choice when your customer is ready to make a decision. And so using any medium by considering, where am I leveraging this as part of the customer journey? So you need to understand your customer and then look at the piece of content you're creating and then saying, where does this fit in the customer journey? For instance, you might be building a cold audience who don't really yet know, like, and trust you to the point where you might not share more, personal things, private things, because people are just there to learn a particular topic. And I always say, people come for the topic, they'll return for the host. If you continue to build and create this environment where people feel they're connecting with you because you're building this culture on your podcast or on your, your stream, your spaces that resonates with them. So considering that, I'll try and snapshot it a little bit. So considering that, can you then look at a multiple of different things, because not everybody is going to want to listen and interact and engage with a long form, but rather the shorter forms. But then the more that they're resonating with you and then they're thinking, gee, has got some really great things that she's talking about, the more you build know, like, and trust, often the more time that someone will give you. They'll invest more time in with you, to the point that they're probably going to hang out more on your spaces and then speak to you more. And then obviously they may come to you and say, look, can I find out how to work with you? But ultimately, at the end of the day, you've also got to think, where am I positioning my thought leadership? Where do I want to become known, and how am I helping people? And then make sure that the conversation that you are having also incorporates this, because this is something that I did, a mistake that I made. I love interviewing people and having conversations. I learn way more, I'm sure, from my guests than, and that's why I love to connect and interview guests. However, my message got lost in the noise of my own podcast because I got so distracted by interviewing people, and you can do, on Spaces. So be mindful that you're also, showcasing your expertise. So you might have a mixture. Your podcast could be some solo shows, some interviews, and then you may incorporate some of your spaces, but say, hey, these are the kind of things that we get into behind, after the show, whatever you might term it. And if you want to hang out with me on some of those spaces, here's where we connect. And so I would say it's going to be a mixture of things, but it's the mixture of things that's going to be determined by, your strategy that you do. And that's one of the things that's the most fun, is finding out, how can I leverage this and create a strategy that works for me and my business. Does that help?
Does that help, Chair?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Annemarie. Now, I definitely have a different perspective on this now.
Great.
And I'm glad I asked just in the beginning of my journey, not in the middle of it.
Yes.
So
It's a good,
Yes,
I
thank you
wish
so
someone
much.
had told us that. Hey, Keith, right at the beginning.
Oh,
These are
2008. You
there
got
was no one
idea how many
there.
mistakes we
So,
made.
yeah.
Oh, took us years to learn what you just said.
Yeah, yeah. I made all of the
Wow.
mistakes so that others don't have to do that. Although some of us are entrepreneurs, so sometimes we need to go through some of those experiences ourselves.
And Gia, do you think
Thank you so
Annemarie would be a good guest for you? Is
Oh,
that- is that-
100%. She's on my list, by the way, Annemarie.
Oh, lovely.
You're on
Let's
my list.
connect.
Yes.
Look forward to
Yes.
it.
Yeah, me too. And so I'll reach out to you, and then we can have a chit chat and
Fantastic.
see how we can move forward.
No worries.
Thank
So
you so
just to-
much for your insight.
You're welcome.
Just to pick up on what you've just said to Gia and everyone in the group, you need to write this down. So Gia has a podcast called Twitter Spaces Decoded. The hashtag is Twitter Spaces Decoded. The website is twitterspacesdecoded.com. It's possibly the best podcast I've ever heard of. I was the first one, so I'm a bit biased. But I was the first guest, but it got me hooked. Last week was on Bitcoin. Yesterday we had Billy in the call. You've got to listen to that. It's unbelievable. So Gia has a podcast of her own. You've got to go and have a listen to this. It's unbelievable. And that interview that Gia did with me has inspired me to write a blog. My show is called Virtually Unlimited Audio. That's the hashtag. It's in the nest. Virtually Unlimited Audio. You'll find everything I've ever done since August there. And the URL is virtuallyunlimitedaudio.com, which points directly at that interview with Gia, where we pull apart everything we've just said here. It's unbelievable. So, we're learning, but we're keeping it going. We're keeping it going as a long-form idea. So we've had a couple of people join again. Torch, you've got you've got your hand up again, and then Dan. And then we may move to the fourth question, which is, how do you market your podcast? Probably the one thing most people want to know primarily. So, Torch, you've got an idea?
Yes. Thank you once again. So, Ms. Gia, I feel like a revolution has begun. So why limit yourself? Blend the best of both worlds. As a podcaster myself, I love what Keith said earlier. Referring to this mate, like, hey, why pay for something if you can get it for free? So I feel like with Twitter Spaces, you're able to record some great content and then upload it as a podcast episode. So I feel like, hey, why not try to maybe blend both and get a bigger ROI, if you will. So short, sweet, simple. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for your comments. And Dan, you've got some thoughts?
Yeah, so this is probably more on the next question of how do you market your podcast or any video for that matter, or audio. So does anyone here use some sort of platform or something where you produce a podcast and then you can publish it out to different places like YouTube or different platforms? Does that exist? Does anyone use something like that to push their content out to various platforms?
In the form that you've made the video yourself and then you want to push it out, or they make the video for you?
Oh, so you've made a video yourself, whether it's an interview or in my case it'd be a tutorial, and then I would want a way to quickly publish it to different places.
Yeah. I don't know of a video version. Does anyone have their idea? Annemarie, do you know of one where you can publish multiple times, other than, say, StreamYard, where you're doing it live?
Not video. I tend to take and we'll talk about that in the next question. But no, not that I have heard. So maybe go around the room and see if anyone puts their hand up that they might have heard of a platform.
Yeah. While we're waiting for any possible answers on that, we know that for sure that if you use StreamYard or Restream, you can send the file live to up to 30 places at once with Restream. That's an amazing site, $16 a month or something. So you can send one file live recorded to YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and 36 other places, whatever it is, the number just keeps going. With StreamYard, you can send it to 8 places. So that might partially answer your question. But one thing I do know, and actually this is really handy to know, just given that you've asked that question, Restream and StreamYard allow you to republish videos. So there's your answer. StreamYard allows you to pre-record a video, put it back in the file, and then they'll send it out for you. That might be a winner for you, I think.
Dan,
StreamYard.
can I ask a question? Keith, could I ask a question of Dan?
Yeah,
Who's
please.
your ideal client? Who are you trying to get in front of? And while he's muting himself, this is something that I'll often say to people too, where we get really, kind of transfixed on, I need to increase my downloads, I need to increase my followers, I need to increase. And so that's really the vanity metrics, isn't it? But one of the things that I'll say to people is build reputation equity. Focus on that, building your reputation as, the choice for your ideal client versus a choice and, amongst hundreds of other people who might be able to support them. The reason being is, and if we liken it to the conversation that you just asked, Dan, around how can I get my message out to way more places, well, who's your ideal client? Who are you trying to get out in front of? Because I would much rather you focus on a few select platforms and nail those, get really known on that, because you're more likely to build that reputation and connection with them because they are your ideal client. Even if there's 100, 1,000, 10,000 there versus millions of people who may not do anything. So Dan, I'd love to know, who are you actually trying to get your content out in front of?
I guess in my case, it's anyone who's wanting to learn learn programming, and so that's what I do. I do programming and database design, that sort of thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a technological crowd.
Yeah. So what I would say to you then is, when you say anyone, and absolutely, and I'm sure we could go around the room and we would all say who can benefit from your services or support your programming, everyone, which is great. But I would encourage you to have a look at your existing client base and who are the people that you've really enjoyed working with. And there are more what I would call triggers, if you will, for want of another word, that they would go, Dan, I need your information and I need it now. You could probably niche in even further into who that person is, because once you identify that, you can be far more targeted in where you start to share your content, who you reach out to, who you connect with, who you partner with, who you get on your show because they're connected to a group of your audience. Who can you be a solution for with the content that you're sharing, that they say, Dan, we need to get you on our podcast or have your podcast be syndicated because we need our community to know about your services and your training. That's what I would encourage you to do if you haven't already.
I'll just pick up on that, Dan. I think that's a fantastic answer from Annemarie. I'll give you a really cool example, two examples. Annemarie is the podcasting queen. Don't ask her about TikTok videos. She doesn't know the answer. What is TikTok? What she doesn't know. She hasn't tried it. But you want to know anything at all about podcasting, ask Annemarie. Annemarie has placed her stake in the ground to say, I am the podcasting queen. I am the Twitter dude. Ask me anything about Twitter and I'll probably know the answer or know someone who knows the answer. We need you, Dan, to be that guy. What is your thing? What do you want to be known for? So when someone says, I've got to get my head around how to, program Python, or I've got to get my head around HTML5, or I've got to get my head around ... In fact, let's do that, Dan. I've got to get my head around ... What is ... for you?
Okay, so in my case, it's SQL, which is for programming database, querying databases.
There it is.
And also Python programming. So
there
you mentioned that, I'm working on that. The thing is, so I'll tell you a story. Like, in my Twitter bio, I used to have a link to my Udemy course, and I removed that from my bio because the Udemy website, where you can sell your courses, they rank the courses on the website because you're sort of competing against other people who are also loading similar courses. They rank them based on one of the metrics is the conversion rate. So it's the number of people who not just click on your course but end up buying it. So what I was concerned about, because you come across all sorts of people on Twitter. A lot of those people aren't interested in, say, taking your course, but if they clicked on my link to my product and then didn't buy it, that would lower my conversion rate and it would lower my rank. Yeah, so I removed that because when people are on the Udemy website, if they type in that topic, they're interested in that topic. Whereas on Twitter, people will click on links all the time just to see what the person is all about. So I get what you're saying, Annemarie, about trying to find the audience. So that's partly why on Twitter I removed that link for that purpose, because a lot of people on Twitter won't be part of the audience interested in that.
Yeah.
But I think on other platforms, say on YouTube, if someone, let's say your thing is motivation, someone types in motivation and they find a clip on YouTube on it and they click on it, they're a potential customer. So I kind of think of like casting the net wide. And there are certain platforms where people will actually search a topic and you can reach those people.
Yeah. One of the
people
things,
are still using YouTube.
let me share something
go,
just
Annemarie.
briefly, and I think this is going to be helpful for everyone who's kind of here in business and for you too, Dan. When you have a look at the customer journey, one of the things that you want to do is create something which is, it's probably going to be free. I call this your irresistible signature giveaway. And what it's going to do is it's going to help you to grow your list, and the people that have put their hand up to get access to this is most likely going to be your ideal client. And then the nurturing that goes on behind the scenes and your email follow-up and so forth, and maybe other things that you're doing, is going to continue to nurture that lead then into maybe an inquiry and then, enrolling into your course. So you're basically nurturing them to get to know you more and why, and create this need as to why they need to get access to that. So for you to consider, what would be something that you would be able to create very simply? I created a 3-part podcast series because a lot of my ideal clients need more knowledge, and there's certain things that I include in that. But for you, if you're thinking of your ideal client, what can you give them access to that gets them off your podcast, off your wherever actually, your spaces, whatever platform, to get access to this particular thing that is, if you had a look at their challenges, the most pressing problem and their most pressing need. And that's what I would encourage you to focus on, because then what you can do is continue to share that. And it's not going to minimize, the Udemy, because it's probably not even on Udemy, but it is on your website, or so you've got, kind of created the squeeze page, and start to focus on building that, because a majority of those people will become your future students. And so that's what I call that my podcast profit pipeline. It's a pipeline, this nurturing sequence of people, but get people off your Twitter spaces, off your podcast, onto your list, so that you can start nurturing that relationship. So for you just to find out, well, what is that irresistible signature giveaway that I can create that's going to enable me to continue to have that as my call to action. So by the way, if you've liked this podcast and you are a budding, such and such a programmer, I've created whatever it is, get access to that to support you in your journey, and then obviously give the URL. So just kind of something like that, but something so compelling, people will get off that podcast, off the Twitter spaces, to get access to that. Does that help?
Does that help, Dan?
Yeah, that definitely helps. I think a couple of options would be to chunk it. So I could do take an existing course, because some of my courses are like 12 hours long, do like a shorter one, say a 1 hour one, and that could be like a giveaway, a sort of a teaser, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember that...
Can I give you an example?
Yeah, go Keith.
Yeah.
So when this is a really good example of what we're talking about here, because we're talking about question 4, how do you promote your podcast? When Annemarie and I did a show together for 2 years, every Monday for 2 years at 10 a.m., in December 2010, I decided, you know what, I'm going to focus on Twitter and ultimately Twitter video, and Annemarie was going to keep going with podcasting. In that initial phase, Annemarie said, look, why don't we leverage the momentum we've made, and we created a 10-part podcast series about Twitter. It's still there. Crack the Twitter code. It's on SoundCloud. DM me if you want a copy. And basically, Annemarie interviewed me about how to use Twitter. It's a 10-part podcast series, and I still use it as a lead magnet. It's just sensational. So what that does is it showcases Annemarie's skills as an interviewer, so I still send it to people who want to know how she does it. I still send it to people to say, look, if you want to know more about Twitter, this is the basics. That'll get you started. And then if you want to have a conversation, you want me to actually ring you, well, then that's my time, and then that's when the clock starts ticking. And we can do that later. But it's the most amazing first step. You know, we had a bit of fun doing it. I turned it into an ebook, which has had hundreds of downloads. And Annemarie, that's really the essence. And why don't we riff on that, the idea of how do you promote your podcast? Because what you did there for me is still being used 5 years later. And it's just a model that just keeps working, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And just a couple of points. I mean, you know, just all across the general platforms, you'd want to make sure that you are continuing to share that. But there was an interesting, the feedback that you get from conversations, it can be incredibly helpful. And I remember one of my colleagues on LinkedIn, she messaged me. She said, all of these people that are just sharing their full shows. She's like, I just don't have time to listen to all of them. Now, remember that you want to create out of the episodes some sound bites that really hone in to some of the key things that you are sharing to kind of let people know that this is the conversation. So enough that some people are going to get what they need and then off they go, and others would like to listen to the long form. So make sure that you're creating different snippets that suits the learning style and obviously the timing and that so forth for your clients. But then also, I mentioned earlier, don't let your message get lost in the noise of your own podcast. If you are doing Twitter Spaces and interviews with other guests, remember that the ultimate goal of your podcast, I would imagine, is to build your own reputation as well, to be mindful that the guests that you have on your show are related to the area that you want to build that reputation. And for instance, Gia was talking about, I believe I had a bit of a look on her profile around branding, personal branding and positioning. So I think, Keith, you mentioned that her podcast was called Twitter Spaces Decoded. Now, remember, this is what I wish I had have done years ago. I started talking about social media when Keith and I were sharing social media to get our podcast out. And people were asking me, come and speak to our business groups. And I was happy to share. Now, I watered down my message as a personal brand strategist. I was in the career industry then, unknowingly, because I was happy to share. And that was a lesson that I learned when I was speaking to one of my colleagues who knew me well. And she said, I've hired a personal brand strategist. Can't wait to get to work. And actually you do that, don't you, Annemarie? She said, I forgot, because you're starting to talk more about social media. So Gia, what I would recommend, say for you, is to say, Twitter Spaces Decoded to build your brand. Always bring it back to why are we here using Twitter Spaces to build your brand, or whatever, kind of your, your statement, your how you market yourself, so that whatever you're talking about always brings it back to where you're wanting to position your expertise. If you talk about tech, like yesterday, I believe you talked to someone who was helping around audio. So in other words, to ensure that the audio quality, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's not so distracting that it's going to inhibit or detract from you building your personal brand, if you are leveraging Twitter Spaces to build your brand, to build that reputation. Always bring that back. And so therefore, it doesn't matter wherever you're sharing your platform or your podcast on different platforms, people are starting to follow you and listen to you, consume your content. And often what people will do is they'll binge listen to every single episode, because every single episode is speaking to their needs, their challenges, where they want to be. I call it your promise of value and promise of expectation. Every show is valuable, but the expectation is, if I hire Gia, I'm going to be able to build that brand that stands out from everybody else. So it's an expectation that they are getting through just hearing your stories, hearing the interviews that you do, but but be mindful to do it through the lens of where you want to continue to position yourself and speaking into where you know your ideal client wants to be. And then find the platforms where your ideal client is on. You can create different episodes, even on your website, to speak. You know, you might have top 10 questions of frequently asked questions of your ideal clients. Create a resource page and, you know, continue to share that, you know, because that obviously has the call to action to get people off the podcast and kind of onto your list. But you can see, Keith, in that answer is there's a lot of different ways, but you want to make sure that you pinpoint the right way for you. And that's going to be different for every business because it depends on your ideal client, where they tend to hang out, you know, the way that they like to engage and consume content.
It's extremely good. Before I riff on this idea of marketing, Gia, do you want to write a reply there? I mean, this is really powerful. You just got a masterclass right to your ears. I want to hear your thoughts on that. That was just genius.
I love everything Annemarie said, and I am actually a branding specialist. And when you mentioned that, I just went back and audited my own timeline.
Good for you.
And I was like, I haven't talked about that in so long. And you're right. I'm a content and branding and funnels specialist. I build online businesses from the ground up. Yeah. I launched a lot of businesses for people, and I haven't talked about that in so long. So
Perfect.
Yes, I think we need to audit ourselves every now and then. Thank you so much. And I was actually thinking about this the other day when it comes to marketing, is that when I looked at my website, twitterspacesdecoded.com, by the way, people, please don't judge. I'm still building it. I'm still learning how to do this podcast website thing. So hang in there. The good stuff are coming soon. So I looked at it and I was... it's all about the guests, and this is where I'm coming from. I want to highlight everyone, their expertise, and I want people to learn how to do this properly. So, but then Gia was left out. So my expertise, where I'm teaching people how to do this. This is why I started the show, to help people do this. So what I was thinking is maybe, again, this is just an idea, is that maybe during the week, like I like the after show idea, is that sometimes I'm a very passionate mompreneur. So we go through a lot as entrepreneurs, especially through the pandemic. So it was going to be something like Twitter Spaces Decoded for parents, for example. How do you, for entrepreneurship, for mompreneurs, how do you beat analysis paralysis, things like that. But I just didn't know how to add it to the website and how it would make it flow. So this is where I'm still learning and experimenting.
Yeah, and one of the things that you'll find, Gia, is, you know, remember Twitter Spaces is a platform that you're using to build and connect. And so I love that you've had that aha, because you may not necessarily want to position yourself just as a Twitter Spaces, expert, but a Twitter Spaces expert for mompreneurs who, by the way, also need your full service. And that could be where you really position yourself, because, you know, Keith, you mentioned around the podcasting queen. That, by the way, that's not a name that I gave myself. And honestly, I really don't want to get stuck in tech. What I love is the strategy, is the messaging. It's the, you know, helping people understand their brilliance and then bringing that out. That's where I really love to support people. So for you, Gia, it's, you know, who is my ideal client? I can use Twitter Spaces because she, if it's mums, she loves hanging out there because it gives her a space where she can connect with other mompreneurs. And then that can be something that, hey, I need to learn how to do Twitter Spaces. By the way, Gia, I think I need help with my funnel. And so it could be, you know, maybe when you have a look at your good, better, best programs and offerings, that could be where people start off with you. I'll help you create, you know, a brand message and helping you to really get started on Twitter Spaces. But by the way, if you really want to build your business and take that to the next level, I could also support you in helping you build that back end as well. So you can kind of see how you can use Twitter Spaces to get in front of your ideal client, and you create this like a business program pathway that nurtures clients to some of those higher level programs if you do it correctly.
This is amazing.
How cool is that?
It's amazing.
This is a TED Talk. I mean, that's a TED Talk right there. That was a TED Talk. We just got a TED Talk. Big 100 for Annemarie. That was probably the answer of the show. Big 100 for Annemarie, or whatever icon you want. I want to bring Jason in on this idea of promoting the show, because Jason has a really cool show, 2 shows, and we haven't actually had a chat to Jason on this call, but I'd love to hear how you're promoting the show, because this is now question 4. How do you promote the podcast? When you turn them, you're actually doing a very specific thing. You've got a Patreon campaign, and people that support you get the copies. So tell us how you're doing all your promotion, because I think people need to hear your story.
Thanks, Keith. I'm trying Billy's hints from last spaces, so hopefully my audio sounds a little bit better.
The proximity effect.
The proximity effect, yes. Yeah. So to promote our spaces, we advertise using like our cute little Canva video, but we also have started pushing it onto our platforms on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And I think people can. I see people every space who are listening from other platforms, so we do get some viewers in that way. Because that's an untapped resource we never thought to try and promote to. And we get our guests that come on our Tuesday show to also promote the space. And that's really helpful too. We're also really consistent, meaning that we have our spaces at the same time on the same day every single week. So people who are on platforms like who aren't on mobile, you don't have the spaces, whatever it's called, the dashboard, to see who's speaking. They know when it is, and they can look for the tweet to join instead of what we have on mobile, which is that little, whatever it's called. I'm not sure. Like at the bottom, you guys got the thing where you can see in the top? I think it's called the dashboard. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it called the Twitter tab? Is it called the Twitter tab? Or the Twitter Spaces tab? Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. And you're right. So there's a million ways you can record, and I love listening to everybody's ideas on how they record. I'm trying Headliner for our space tonight, but we always get the data from Twitter, which is a bit of a pain. It's a huge file, and then we have to convert it in Audacity. But as a perk to our patrons who maybe missed the space or want to listen to it over and over again, we put that on our patron page, and that's been really popular. That's been probably one of the biggest perks that the patrons get on the page. Yeah, so it's a way that we can monetize those spaces. And then just to finish, I take a month break because I run a podcast show called the Science Podcast. We're all about the puns, and I take a month break because I put out a show a week, and I'm just gonna use those old spaces recordings as shows when I'm on my break. They're already done, so I'm excited about that. Hopefully I nailed what you asked there, Keith. Thanks for the question.
No, it's very, very good, because I specifically was very excited about those 5 questions, because we're just about to go to group questions, but these are the 5 questions I think most people want to know. How do you record your initial session? How do you edit that file? How do you host that file? How do you market the show? So let's riff a little bit on the marketing, and then we'll go to general questions for everyone who wants to stay, which effectively becomes the after party, which means if you do need to go, I fully understand. We've been going a couple of hours already. We've been going for 2 hours. So, if you're getting a bit tired, or you need to go and eat, or do your own podcast, or do some work, you're very welcome to do that. So let's start, Annemarie, with some general principles for marketing the show, and then we'll quickly run the room on that. Then we'll just open it up to general questions. More importantly, Annemarie, what's your timing? Do you need to go soon? Have you got a meeting?
Yeah, I have to go at probably about 10 to 1, 5 to 1, so I can still stay on for a little bit longer.
You've got about half an hour.
Yeah,
okay, so let's be very conscious of that. So just tell us a little bit about the marketing, because I know this is a big pain point for people.
Yes.
And then we'll open it up to general questions.
So the way that we promote our podcast for the podcast network is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we cut those shows up into sound bites, and then we create graphics, we create audiograms, and then we share that across, the different social media platforms. We also share that very much on our company page too, over on LinkedIn. One of the things that I'm finding is that, the lead, the feed, I should say, versus company pages. People who follow company pages are more likely to see content because they've actually followed your page, and so you don't get a lot of other people's content as well. There's a new site that I have just started to share our content, and you can not only have smaller snippets, but you can have the full shows too. But where I like this, it's called Audea.io. AUDEA.io, and what they are doing is they've also created an app as well, but that other podcasters can get together, and I think collaboration and sharing of each other's audience and things like that are going to be huge. And so Audea is something else that we are doing, but it's doing that consistently, day out, day in, day out. Have the right hashtags, go and participate in different conversations, and then if someone asks a question about a certain topic, if you've got an episode that you've answered that, or a guest has shared more on that, share that so you can start to contribute back to the community from different episodes and things like that. And there's so many different ways, but those are the ones that we do a majority of, and we do those consistently every week for each of our episodes.
Yeah. Well, look, given that that's a really good wrap up, and given that you need to go soon, I'm going to give people a chance to ask questions while they've got you. So let's move to the fifth section, and that is really just an open session where people can talk about their sessions, but most importantly, ask questions of Annemarie, because we only have her for half an hour. So does anyone have any questions? Please put your hand up if you've got any specific questions for Annemarie about any of the four parts we've talked about. Jason.
Hi, I have a question for Annemarie. I would like to pick your brain about how we advertise our podcast. What is an appropriate length, do you think, to advertise for a podcast? Ours, I've been running them without thinking really, or even asking somebody who knows more than me. And they're about a minute. So I think they may be a bit long, but I'd like to hear what you think.
Yeah, sure. I must say I've never really advertised my podcast, so any kind of time length. But let me ask you, go back to a question for you. What are you finding as far as the results, and where are you advertising? What are you doing to advertise?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We're advertising through our network. Like we have a really big Twitter account, so I cut together our own ad about podcasts. Because people are following us already, they're probably the people to listen to it first rather than random people. So I'm not paying for advertisements usually. I'm just.
Oh, you mean like just promoting? Yes, just.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. And are you getting results from that? Is that working for you?
I would say yes. Yeah, like on weeks I'm super busy and I don't do that, the numbers are a little lower. And when I promote it like heck, the numbers are usually a lot better.
Yeah.
So,
one of the things that I've noticed Keith does, and he does this really well, and this might be something that you want to implement, is sometimes asking the question of your audience rather than kind of we guesstimate, don't we? We kind of assume, is ask your audience, and you may be able to do it, ask a question in a roundabout way. If you've got the time to listen or watch, if you're doing video, what is a good time frame? 15 seconds? 30 seconds, a minute, and see what your audience, gauge what your audience thinks. And then I would also say, you've done a minute podcast episode, why not try a 30 second or 45 second and see which one has the best hits. But one of the things to be able to compare apples to apples, you'll probably want to share it across similar timing, so that for our audience, when we release it at this time, this snippet length, that works the best for us. Do a little bit of a trial, and from those results, your audience will probably give you kind of the answer that you're looking for. Does that help?
Simple. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. It's like I just have to run an experiment is all.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
right.
With your audience, your existing large audience.
I'll riff on that. There's two things there. One is what Annemarie's talking about for people that don't know, is that I, every single day, run a Twitter poll. And I'm just simply teasing out what my shows might be about. I'm not going to run a show if it's not interesting. So I run a Twitter poll. With the Twitter poll, you have one question, and you can have 4 possible answers, and you can have it for up to 7 days. Right? That's the template that I use. So the question might be, how long should my videos be? 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, other, please comment. Now, even if you don't get a definitive answer, you've engaged your audience in a different way that's fun to them. So I run a Twitter poll every single day because I get really good intel on what my show should be about. Tomorrow we're running a show with a mate of mine about, well, what are you doing in 2022? And so the 3 answers I gave were, 1, you want to start podcasting. If you do, have a chat to Annemarie. You want to write that book because you've always had that on your list, or do you want to start Twitter Spaces because you keep hearing about them? And then other, something else. And so that's had about 80 comments, and then that suddenly gives me a bit of an insight into what the show would be about. Would that help, Jason? Oh, I think I might.
Sorry, I know I'm here. I was just on mute. Yeah, I'd like to try a poll. We tweet a lot. I don't know if you follow us. But our account is very active. So what's one more tweet with the other 10 dog tweets of the day?
Yeah, but the other hack that I'm really interested in talking about, I love this. With Twitter, with videos on Twitter, which is why I use Filmora, videos on Twitter that are less than 60 seconds loop, which means they just keep playing. So it's simply a matter of experimenting with 15, 30 or 45 seconds, because if you can get them under 60 seconds, which I'm guessing you already do, they will loop. They just play again over and over and over and over again. So if you look at that video of the 5 questions, you'll notice that it just never stops. And subsequently, it's had 1,000 views, 1,200 now. So, Twitter videos, this is why I love them. Twitter videos give you very, very robust stats. And I can share this with anyone who wants to know. That video has had 5,000 people have looked at that tweet. And 1,200 of them have watched the video. And as a result, my next question is, well, how many of them took the time to listen to the show? And I can tell you that 500 people have listened to this show. That's got to be my record. 500 people have listened to this show. And at one time, we had 68 people at one time. 64 people at one time on the call, and 500 in total since we started. So to answer Jason's exact question, if you run some experiments and you go, hey, you know what, when we do these smaller videos, we get many more views. Probably a good hack there. Would that help? Are you doing shorter? Your videos are pretty short anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, our Spaces one are shorts. I tie them to the card advertising, so I don't get the same kind of stats. So maybe I'll try an experiment where I don't tie it to the card advertising.
If the videos are already there, you get very robust stats.
Yeah,
send some to me and I'll do them for you.
I'll sneak in some dog pictures and we'll definitely get more views. We'll trick some people. Oh, it's a dog video. Oh, no, it's an ad for a podcast. But it's too late. You've already watched.
Yeah. Made you look, you dirty chook.
All right. Thank you so much, Keith.
Clickbait.
Thanks, Annemarie. Yeah. I've got to run.
You got to go and do your podcast.
Yeah.
Share that in the nest because we'll be finishing soon. But share that in the nest before you go. Any other questions about the idea of marketing or anything to do with the idea? We've got 20 minutes. So take the opportunity, or more importantly, follow Annemarie while she's here, and she's going to be recording this. Has anyone got any additional questions for Annemarie about any of those other 4 questions before we wrap up? If not, that's a very good segue to end the call. While you're having the courage to put your hand up, if indeed you do need that, what I will tell you is that we've made the dashboard that during the course of the show, we reached a total of 363,000 people Of those 363,000 people, 500 of them came and listened to it. And at one stage, we had 64 people on the call at one time. So this is ROI. This is why I'm doing Twitter Spaces, because it's worth my time. I get a result. We're now working out how to get a recording. We're now getting a very, very clean example of how to host the show on other sites. We're getting multiple hits from various sites moving forward. And as Twitter Spaces evolves, we'll get better at it. So with that in mind, if no one has any thoughts, I might wrap the show up. Last call. If anyone's got any thoughts, just jump in. Or maybe I'll just throw to Annemarie to wrap up and tell us how they can contact you, Annemarie, before you have to rush off to your 1 o'clock.
Keith, I think there's someone there that has their requests. Is that meaning that someone's got their hand up or
That's
not?
right, Amanda. Amanda has requested the mic, and also Montclair Campbell has requested the mic. So I'll bring them into the call. We've probably still got time for them. But while they're coming into the call, do you want to just mention how people can contact you and before your 1 o'clock deadline?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely connect with me on Twitter, and look forward to and DM me if you like. My website is annemariecross.com. If you want to listen to some of our podcasts on our podcast network, it's ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com. And just reach out, and love to have a chat.
That's perfect. So Montclair Campbell, jump in. Tell us what you're doing.
Hi there. Hi, sorry it's very late, so I have to keep my voice down where I am. So my name's Montclair Campbell. I'm a barrister. I've started doing some talks just today actually, on sort of legal updates and so forth. But I was just wondering two questions, if I may. They'll be very quick. So the first is, I understand that on December the 1st, Twitter Spaces will be available to everybody. So I was just wondering, does anybody know whether at that point recordings will also be available to everybody? So that's my first question. My second question is, for those who put on the monetization feature, how long did Twitter take to review the applications? Those are my two questions, if I may. Thank you so much.
I'll take this one. So everyone now has Twitter Spaces. Everyone should have that feature. You should be able to do it, and Spaces will be able to be recorded on iOS and Android on every device moving forward. So there's actually a tweet in the nest about that if you want to go and have a look at that. One of the previous, it's just what it looks like. It's just a slider immediately above the Start Now button. So you'll see that Pixie has actually taken a screenshot of one of her, and it just says record space, yes or no, slide over. And just when you do that, you push Start Now. So when you start a space, you'll either have it or you won't. And when you do get it, you can record the space. It will effectively be a replay. You don't get the download, and it lasts 30 days. And that's what this show has actually been about how to keep it going. As regards to the monetization, that's a sort of a bit of a chunky question. A bit like verification. I've applied 3 times. I've applied 3 times to be verified, and I still haven't got it. So I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that one. Do you, Pixie? I forgot that you were there.
Nope, I don't know, but I'm going to try when I hit 10K, and I'm going to go for the content creator.
Yeah.
There are other ways you can do it. If you had multiple articles in different publications, things that point back to you on the web, you can use those to increase your chances of getting a blue check mark. And sometimes it's just by knowing the right people. I mean, just get out there and try.
Yeah, so it's amazing. So hopefully that's answered your question there.
No, thanks so much.
No worries. Please reach out. Please reach out to Annemarie Cross, annemariecross.com, and Annemarie Cross has an enormous amount of information to share about this idea of podcasting. She is recording this session, and rather than me editing it and sending it out, Annemarie is going to send out whatever parts of this recording resonate. And she's the person to talk to when you want to talk about podcasting, because that's what she knows. Amanda, we've got you in now. Do you want to have a chat about what we've chatted about so far? You've asked for the mic.
Hi, Keith. Hello, everybody else. Look, first of all, thanks, Keith. You knew me back when Tanya and I had a podcast.
That's right. What was that called?
The Aussie Blogger Podcast.
The Aussie Blogger Podcast with the didgeridoo.
That's correct.
Yeah. Small world.
So it's been a while. So why I was going to speak up was very quickly. Thank you, Annemarie, so much, because one thing Tanya and I both learnt was that our ideal customer were new bloggers and they didn't have any money. So we weren't able to monetize, like get any money from the podcast that we did because our target audience didn't have any money to pay us. But we had a great time and we learnt a lot. I'm now looking forward to maybe starting a podcast again in 2022. So the question I'm going to ask you is this. If you're a bit of jaded podcaster where you attempted to make money and it didn't succeed because you hadn't done enough research about your ideal customer, I really liked, one, the point that you put out about making sure you know who that is and then ensuring that your podcast doesn't get lost with other things so they don't know what you're on about. But two, the one that I've still got a question mark on is how often should you podcast to basically improve your presence as an influencer?
Yeah, great questions. And look, there's a couple of things that I would recommend you continue just to ponder over. And message is just so very important. I will even say to people before launching any podcast, make sure that your message is already working and generating leads and inquiries. And ultimately, if you convert them, those are on sales skills and so forth. But one of the things that you can do is run some Twitter spaces or conversations so that what you're doing is the content that you're sharing across different platforms, monitoring, am I cutting through the clutter? Are people saying to you, oh my goodness, this is so good? So you can start to share the message that you're thinking. And this is even before you launch a podcast, because absolutely to go through the whole process of launch and all of that is some time commitment and money. And so I would rather, encourage you to start sharing that message and getting it to the point where it's tweaked and right. And you're creating an audience already so that when you do launch your podcast, you've already got an existing audience who is beginning to know, like, and trust you. So do you have kind of an idea on where you were hoping to, or thinking you're going to start targeting your audience, your niche, your ideal client?
Well, you basically already answered that question for me, because I've got a couple of areas I'm interested in, but I'm not sure which way to go. So I think I didn't even know until today that we had this space in Twitter Spaces to starters. So thanks, Keith, and everybody else who's been talking. And I just happened to come across this when I was looking on Twitter and saw that you guys were on. So I didn't see any of the advertising, any build-up. I just went, oh, this looks really interesting. So I think I'll find out what this Twitter Spaces is. So you've really helped me heaps just with that comment that you've just made, Annemarie. And I just want to thank everybody that's on here today for their generosity and their kindness in sharing what they know and learn and love.
You are welcome.
Let me pick up on that, Annemarie and Amanda. What you've just said there is really amazing. You are part of the majority of people that still haven't heard about Twitter Spaces. So this is actually an extremely good time to jump in. No one's doing it. I can tell you for sure there's almost certainly not an accounting podcast or an accounting Twitter space for Aussie businesses. I can tell you for sure there isn't one because no one's doing them. So you came across Twitter Spaces by accident, but now you're here. So now you know it's here. And Twitter Spaces is free and you run it on your phone and it's a bit of fun. And you can record it and then you can turn it into a podcast and get your mojo again later if you want. So I actually think this is actually an ideal time to reinvent. Can you see yourself doing that, Amanda?
Absolutely, Keith. I've been sort of pondering and putting it out there to the universe about how do I begin? How do I test the waters? How do I utilise the influence I already have within the industry, to then be able to start to put my foot back into the waters again and use it most effectively and time effectively as well. So definitely this has been basically the answer. The universe has answered, and it's done it through certain
Ask and you
individuals.
shall receive.
Yeah. One of the things, thinking, Amanda, I don't really know you that well, but I believe, if I remember correctly, because I remember Keith was interviewed on your show, and I believe one of you, and this may be you, was an accountant. You were kind of the area that you are an expert in. Was that correct? Am I correct in because Keith mentioned kind of accounting as well? Was it accounting, finance that you were involved in as well?
I'm in the accounting finance field, but I actually a tax agent, and I was doing bookkeeping, but then I've changed and switched and gone into advisory with the ATO and focusing more on the training side. And I'm a QuickBooks trainer in Queensland.
Right.
So I've done a complete 360. But definitely what you've said is something that I really do need to look at, and I think this is a fantastic opportunity
definitely.
to do something.
Because remember, one of the things that you could do is, because what you're trying to do is to tap into your ideal client and really find out where is their most pressing challenge. And this is what I've said to all businesses. If we over the last 2 years have not lent in even deeper to our ideal clients to really see where the issues are, then we need to go and do that, because everything that's happened over the last 2 years has now caused different issues and more pressing issues. And if you lean into those and talk about those, share information that's valuable, and obviously your expertise ties into that, that is when you're going to start to really, make ripples in the content, the content of obviously. And so you could have conversations on, say, Twitter Spaces with other people, industry stakeholders, because you're building a relationship with them, but you invite other business owners, because what you want to say is, where are you struggling as far as business? And if you can kind of tie it a little bit around the finances, what are things that we can be doing as businesses, even when it is tighter, when the market is down? Those, if you start to sow into that and give such value, and again, start to share a little bit of your knowledge and expertise that's going to be relevant to the type of questions and comments and feedback you get from that audience, it's not going to take you long to realize the thread that you want to follow, and that then can inform the kind of content that you have kind of on your podcast. And you might then decide, if you're recording your content that you're creating on Spaces, aspects of that can be cut down and then later created into a podcast as well.
Yeah.
So, just some ideas.
And I've just sent you a DM, Amanda. We last spoke in November 2016. And I've got a link to our podcast we did then. That's how long ago it was that you did that podcast. And the world, everything is new again. But I actually have sent you an example, and please DM me if you want a copy of this. I've sent you an example blog post where last week, Gia in KL interviewed me, sent me the transcript, and I turned it into a blog. So it was live last week. It's a podcast and it's a blog. We all used Headliner for this. It's a new piece of tech we're playing with today. So I think this is something you could do too. Very exciting time.
Absolutely. For me, it's all about being efficient, because when we did the Aussie Blogger, it was very time extensive, but we split the work in half. But now there's just me. So definitely today's given me so many answers. It's like the universe, you ask and you receive. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
The universe always provides.
And thanks for asking. I mean, how many times, Amanda, do we go, I really want to ask a question, but, getting the courage to speak up. And when you do, it's kind of like, I am so glad I did. So good for you.
Yeah. We've got 10 minutes, Annemarie, before you have to go, but Pierre Carley is there. I'm happy to keep going if you want to keep going.
Maybe we should do another one of these Q&A, like master minds.
We definitely do.
This is where I love.
Give us 100 if you give us 100 if you want to have Annemarie on again. Look at that! Look at that! We're lighting up the board. So much wisdom here, and we've been chatting 3 hours. And we're still going.
Yeah.
And look, my wife comes home sometimes and she goes, How can you talk for 3 hours, Keith? I mean, what are you saying? What are you doing? But there's no end to it, is there?
No.
We're still going. Annemarie has to go, but I'm going to keep it going if people want to. But while we've got Annemarie, Pierre Carly is there, Pierre the woman. And then we'll actually run the room one last time before Annemarie. She does have a client appointment at 1 o'clock. So what are you thinking there, Pierre?
Yes, thank you again. This is so amazing. And 1,000, if I could give 1,000, Annemarie, Pixie, Keith, everyone, Torch, Gia, everyone, so wonderful. Someone brought up verification. I was recently featured by USA Today. And so I feel that now I'd like to try to move into a verified space. Do you think that that's enough? It's been Verizon and USA Today. I was nominated for the Humankind Award, Humankind Educator of the Year Award. There's only 2 finalists. So do you think that's the time now to apply for that? That's my question.
I can answer that question specifically because I have applied 3 times. Me. Like, I do Twitter all day, every day, and they wouldn't give it to me. So I know for sure there's a couple of
Sorry,
parameters.
I don't mean to drop. Can I clarify? I said monetization, but fair enough. Verification is a good question as well.
Yeah, we have actually chatted throughout the course of the idea of the blue tick, whether or not the blue tick. So look, by all means try, but I've tried 3 times, and I've got to ask whether it's worth the effort. Of course, if I got it, I'd be pretty happy about that. But I have tried 3 times, and I keep getting a no. So I will try again. But I wouldn't imagine it's a very good time now because Jack left yesterday, and I'm sure they've got other things on their mind than reinventing the verification program. It might also be a very good time because maybe it might be that window of time where they might just get a whole heap of them done. I don't know. It seems to be a bit hit and miss. It's quite difficult to get verified, but by all means, don't let me stop you. Is that a reasonably decent answer, or did I throw it away?
No, that's perfect. Basically, good luck.
Yeah, have a go. So, Annemarie, last thoughts before you have to go, and we definitely will have you back. I know that Gia wants to have you on her show, and we should definitely do another one of these to follow up, shouldn't we?
Yeah, and we might do one on content. That's another area that I love, and maybe even just a spaces where people can bring their questions, and we all learn from that. And just one idea can spark you off on a whole new direction that you hadn't even thought about, and that's what I love about spaces. You know, one of the things that I wanted to say to you, Pierre, you know, it's great to have these goals and to have a blue tick next to your name, but you know what? Just continue to be the awesome that you are. And impacting, because I'm sure your ideal client who's waiting to hear your message doesn't care if you have a blue tick next to your Twitter name. So just continue to be the awesome you and share your message. But I just want to say to everyone, just thank you so much for being here. It's been an incredible amount of fun, you know, and that's what I think business needs to be, doesn't it? I mean, you're sharing your expertise, you're building great connections, and you're having fun as well. And that kind of thing is infectious. And that's one of the reasons why Keith and I started our show back in 2008. It was when the global financial crisis hit, and we were just sick and tired of the doom and gloom being portrayed through mainstream media. Sadly, mainstream media has not changed much. So if you're thinking and sitting back and thinking, do I really want to start Twitter Spaces? Do I really want to eventually start a podcast? You may have a message that other people need to hear. Get out and share it, because you may be the difference that your ideal client needs to hear. So go out and share your message and have fun while you're doing it. That's probably what I would say in wrap up, Keith.
Yeah. Okay. We have to do thousands. Let's ask Twitter for 1,000 button. I'm going to start. Everyone needs to in sync give Annemarie 100. And we're definitely having her back. So look at the board light up. This is Interaction 101, right? This is absolutely genius.